Hi, my name is Ariel Batiste. I'm currently a first-year associate at Finnegan, Henderson, Faribault, Garrett, and Dunner. I'm honored to bring you this installment of Attorneys of Color. Attorneys of Color is brought to you by the Institute of Intellectual Property and Social Justice. Today, I am here with the great Esther Lim. We do not have enough time to recognize all of Esther's accomplishments and accolades throughout her career, but I will certainly try. Esther is a graduate of University of Maryland School of Law, and she holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Computer Science and Mathematics from Townsend University. She is currently at the Washington, D.C.-based intellectual property firm Finnegan, Henderson, Faribault, Garrett, and Dunner, where she is a partner and is the firm's Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. In 2008, Esther spearheaded opening the firm's Shanghai office, where she was managing partner. She was the 47th president of the DC Bar and spends much of her time volunteering with voluntary bars, such as the Asian Pacific American Bar of DC. Esther has been an adjunct professor at Howard University School of Law since 2003, where she teaches intellectual property courses. She is heavily involved with the Institute of Intellectual Property and Social Justice. And finally, she is a dear friend and mentor. Thank you so much for joining me today, Esther. How are you?
Thank you, Ariel. It's a pleasure to be here alongside you.
Great. So just to get started, Esther, will you please tell us about your journey and how you actually came to the United States?
Sure. I was born in Southeast Korea, in a beach town called Busan, and I grew up in Haeundae, walking distance to the neighborhood beach. And at the age of 12, I immigrated to the United States with my family, and along with my parents and my three siblings, we planted roots in a rural part of Maryland, north of Baltimore.
Now, Esther, was it always your plan to go to university when you moved to Maryland?
When I moved to Maryland, I actually have to say that I wasn't thinking much about my future. My siblings and I and my mother didn't speak a word of English when we landed here. And so it was from the get-go, sink or swim experience of trying to learn the language. We were immersed in a completely strange and new culture. We left behind all of our relatives and our friends and teachers and everyone we knew. And so our lives really changed upside down. And so it was just struggling about how we were going to survive day to day.
And at what point did you decide education was the pursuit you wanted to take?
Education has always been an important part of my family and our culture, where there's a very heavy emphasis on academic success, which was viewed as the foundation for anything else in the future. Our pathway to the education system in Korea was quite limited. We were extremely poor, and even the possibility of getting into colleges and universities at that time was almost unfathomable. It's what drove my father to want to come to the United States, where schools and education system would be accessible by all of his children. So we started going to public school when we landed in Maryland. And obviously for the first few years, it was very difficult not speaking the language. But we eventually overcame those challenges linguistically and was able to acclimate. And it was while I was in high school, I guess I started really thinking more about college and university and how I was going to get there, since all of my siblings and I, each of us supported ourselves through school. And so we were not in a position where we were able to rely on our parents to support our college education. And we've had to work and hold many part-time jobs through all of our schooling, actually, before college and during and after. I have to say that while education was really a guiding principle or a goal in terms of concrete ideas about how to get there and how to survive was not at all clear.
Wow, what a story of resilience. And that story continued as you studied computer science and mathematics at Townsend University. Were you even thinking about pursuing a legal career when you made that decision?
No, I did not see myself as someone who had the chance to be a lawyer in this country. Being a lawyer in Korea is a very highly respected profession. And only the most elite of the elites even have access to that door. So for me, as a struggling immigrant, supporting my family from middle school to high school, working at small family-owned stores to make ends meet, while my dad pursued ministry as a pastor, serving the Korean community. I was not thinking of the possibility of being a lawyer in this great country. I was hoping that I could graduate college and get a solid job. The reason why I ended up as a double major in computer science and math is by happenstance. The high school where I was going, Joppatown High School in rural Maryland, north of Baltimore, offered data processing class. I believe it was in my sophomore year. And I just happened to take that class along with, other classes that they offered the same practical, like typing. We actually used to have a class to learn how to type. And so when I took data processing as a sophomore in high school, that's the first time I actually got to touch a computer.
Wow.
I've never even seen a computer, but they had a school-owned computers that you can use during the class. It was a monochrome, one of those blinking green cursors. And we were challenged to write little snippets of code to make the computer do different things, solve a problem. And for me, it came so naturally, like learning a new language, which I was still doing at that time as a fairly recent immigrant. But in my computer class, I was on the same level playing field as my classmates. No one seemed to have an advantage or a head start. And we all learned from the same textbooks. We got to do the same exercises. And to me, it was like solving a little puzzle. And I liked that intellectual challenge, and I really took to it. Just like one of my favorite classes in high school was geometry, because it just seemed so natural and intuitive to me, really figuring out how to get to a solution by using different parts. And it was intellectually stimulating and really gratifying when you got to the answer. And it was just like that for me in that first data processing class. So the next year, I took data processing too, and it solidified my interest in computers generally and also in programming. My dad also was very forward thinking for his generation, coming from a culture where it is a very male dominated society. He still always treated his son and his daughters equally in terms of pursuit of higher education and how important it is to be strong in knowledge. One of his sayings used to be that people can take anything away from you, but what you hold in your mind, no one can deprive you of. And he was always encouraging of doing our academic best. And so when I was in high school, one of the things he mentioned was seeing my interest in computers, he said, you know, computer programming is probably a really good profession for a woman in this country. And he was right. I don't know how he had that insight. This was before the age of proliferation of the internet and the World Wide Web, where information was readily accessible. But somehow he had the sense that that's a field where I could perform, and that I would not be necessarily disadvantaged. So I pursued that in college when I got to Towson University. And after, I think it was during the first year, having taken the first couple of my computer classes, I declared my major in computer science. And then the following year, I added math because I had to take so much math anyway, computer science, that it wasn't a lot of extra credits to get the double major. And so that's how I became a double major.
Wow. I also took a typing class when I was in school, but I was in kindergarten. I think I'm the last the last generation that had to do that. So that's amazing. How did your family react when you finally told them that you decided to pursue law? It seems your family had a very strong influence on your education.
Yes, they did. And I come from, again, a culture where education is valued above all else in many respects. I didn't know I wanted to pursue law until my second year in college, where I had the opportunity to work full-time as a computer programmer for the Department of Defense as part of the university program, the co-op program that I was privileged to have access to. So I was in Southern Maryland at the Naval Air Test Center for the whole summer after my sophomore year. And I programmed every day from 9 to 5. And we clocked in, I sat in front of my computer in my little office, and at noon, we would all gather and we'd go to lunch. And then at 1, we're back in our respective offices, and then we code until 5 p.m.
Wow.
After a whole summer of doing that, I came to the realization that that was not for me. I realized there's a difference between being good at something and loving something. And I didn't love that work dynamic. I wanted more interaction. I wanted more engagement. I needed more stimulation. So starting out as a junior at Towson University, I decided that I needed to figure my life out. My parents obviously didn't go to school here. I don't have relatives or neighbors who are college graduates or lawyers. And so I had no idea what the various professions held, and what, how to pursue those. So I looked at the course offerings at Towson and basically took as many types of different classes as I could possibly expose myself to, from sociology to macroeconomics to accounting to anthropology to pre-law. The pre-law class really resonated with me. I liked having an issue and trying to find out a solution, and it seemed very practical. And on top of that, my and my family's experience as poor immigrants, initially non-English speaking, threw a lot of curveballs in our way, a lot of challenges and obstacles that we had to endure. And, personal and family experience told me that unless you had access to the law, you don't have a voice. You don't necessarily get the justice. Just because you're on the right side doesn't mean you necessarily end up where you should. You needed an advocate. You needed someone to help you navigate the court system and know what it's like to go through that process, whether it's trying to become a citizen in this country, the ins and outs of running a small business, and all of the pitfalls and navigating through that, the financial uncertainties. And so when I looked at my life experiences and what I wanted to do, I thought that I could help people in my community, whether it's immigration law or small businesses, if I went to law school. So while I considered business school and law school concurrently, I ultimately, after taking the pre-law class, decided to sit for the LSAT, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. I am very happy that you decided to take those pre-law classes because that ultimately brought you to Finnegan. Now let's talk a little bit about Finnegan, because that is the only law firm that you have worked for throughout your career. It must be an amazing place. I'm working there too. So tell me about Finnegan, Esther. What brought you here and what has kept you here throughout your career?
What brought me is not only the interest, but a whole lot of luck and kindness and generosity of random strangers. As I mentioned before, I didn't know any lawyers in this country. I'm a first generation college student, a law student, and everything else. And I didn't have access to lawyers as mentors. The only lawyers I got to meet were the adjunct professors from whom I was taking classes at Maryland Law School. And when I was in my third year at Maryland Law School, graduating in the year of 1995, there was a period of economic challenge. Not a lot of firms were hiring, and when firms were hiring, it was in limited numbers. The DC firms at that time were not recruiting from my alma mater. There are a number of DC schools and other top schools around the country, which was the base for recruiting. And so I was summarily declined when I applied to Finnegan in many of the letters that I typed on my typewriter and submitted along with my resume. In the spring semester, just before I graduated, I was frantically at the career development office of Maryland, and I was going through the alumni directory, which was organized in binders by practice areas. The practice area for IP was very, very thin. I believe only 2 names. And one of those names was an in-house counsel at DuPont, just headquartered in Delaware. And I remember reaching out to both of the alums who were willing to talk to current law students to be a resource, and met with both of them, including the in-house counsel at DuPont. He had graduated probably a couple decades before me. He put himself through Maryland Law School evening program while he was supporting a family and working full-time during the day. When he graduated from Maryland Law School, no DC firms would even look at him. And he went through that negative experience himself. And he met with me, and it turned out that where I had done my second summer internship in Korea at an international IP law firm was the same firm that DuPont was using for Korean filings. So he actually knew the people that I worked with the summer before and had high regard for them. And at the end of the meeting with me, he offered to reach out to a couple firms that he worked with in DC. And he contacted one of the most senior partners at Finnegan and another firm. I met with both of them, and I got in the door to Finnegan initially as a courtesy interview because he made the outreach. And that turned into an official interview. I got invited back to meet with 8 other attorneys. And then I came back for a third time to meet with another partner who was out of town when I came for the official interview. And after the 3 rounds of interviews, I was given an offer fairly late in the recruiting process. And so when I started at the firm, I may have been one of the few first-year associates who had not previously summered or worked here as a law student. So that's how my now long career started at Finnegan, but at that time I had no idea that I would be here 28 years later.
Wow. The clarity with which you tell that story, it was such a defining moment in your life, in your career. I can almost see it. I can see young Esther sitting down for that interview. It's just I can really feel how much that meant to you, that one alumni who just happened to have that connection. That's amazing, Esther.
And Ariel, you mentioned connection, and that's one of the things that's really important to me. To have connection does not mean that you look like me or that you come from where I come from. Connection means someone who actually sees you for who you are, wherever you come from, wherever you are, and you extend a helping hand. Not because they can do something for you, but because you can do something for them. And that's the kind of generosity that he extended to me, which opened the door to Finnegan. I know that but for that personal introduction, I would have never gotten an interview here. But for my middle school teacher, who was a substitute at the middle school where I ended up 4 days after immigrating to this country, and she took me and my family under her wings to teach English for free for several summers in a row without anything in return. I would not be where I am, but for the kindness of those random strangers who have graced the path where we were on. And that's really what drives me to this day, is being able to replicate and paying forward the kindness that I've abundantly received throughout my life, both before law and during law, to help others who have less, who didn't get the opportunity that others have, to help equalize and level the playing field. Because so many people in underrepresented communities confront barriers and challenges that slam shut doors of opportunity before you can ever get even close to there. And so that's really what drives me in what I do as a lawyer and in my current position.
Now, let's talk about your current position as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Finnegan. What does it mean to have diversity and inclusion in a law firm to you?
To me, it's central to who we are and where we need to be the kind of organization that understands the needs of the client, the needs of our workforce. We don't any longer need to make a business case for diversity in this country or elsewhere. It's been studied and it's been proven that diverse teams and diverse workforce produce better product. Clients are seeing that, and they're increasingly not only asking, but demanding diverse teams and diverse talent, because they bring diverse perspectives, different ways of looking at issues and finding a solution that considers all aspects of the issues from different angles. And not only US-centric, but also internationally, being culturally fluent, financially literate. And so when you have diverse teams that bring different talents and assets and experiences, you can deliver better work product. So to have a person and a position created at Finnegan, for example, during the pandemic, post George Floyd, many companies and law firms have followed the trend of creating first chief diversity and inclusion officers. Finnegan was one of them, and I'm tremendously grateful that I can take on this new role, and allows me the focus and attention to put more energy and enthusiasm and teams and resources behind the good work that we were already doing, but also strengthening that foundation with newer initiatives and additional programs.
Now, there is a unique challenge in the legal field of intellectual property with getting diverse candidates and diverse attorneys. How exactly are you going about trying to address this challenge at Finnegan?
Ariel, you're Exhibit A. Part of the reason why I've been teaching at Howard as an adjunct starting in 2003, so it's been now exactly 20 years when I started teaching there. I wanted to do that because I was in a position to teach and to help others at Howard to learn more about the possibility of IP. We developed patent courses, policy courses, and now a practicum course to expose Howard students to this wonderful career in patents and trademarks. By teaching there, we also have access to top talent at Howard who are interested in IP. We're able to identify them, help recruit them, and retain them. We've had a number of Howard graduates work with us, but it's also beyond where you end up. Even if you did not end up at Finnegan, for example, Ariel, we would have mentored you about how you interview at law firms. How do you look? What do you put on your resume? And all of the ins and outs of getting the job, but also more importantly, how to succeed once you get in the door. And so those aspects are really important. By teaching and being out in the communities, we're able to build relationships and help people. But there are a lot of other ways in which we try to identify and recruit diverse talent. Affinity Bar Association, sponsorships, pipeline programs and initiatives, diversity scholarships. There are a number of different ways in which we try to expand our outreach to HBCUs and other colleges and universities and law schools in marginalized communities. And I think that work is extremely important because while talent might be distributed equally, opportunities are not.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned pipeline programs, and this might be particularly of interest to some of our viewers. Can you talk about Finnegan's IP University and what exactly you all are doing and how that got started?
IP University was envisioned, modeled off of another successful program by the HNBA, the Hispanic National Bar Association. 10 years ago, they established a program called IPLI, IP Leadership Institute, where they held a one-week immersion program inviting top Hispanic Latino law students from across the country to come to DC for a week to learn about IP, to meet with practicing lawyers, to visit courts and to visit corporations, and understand how IP is considered by the judiciary, how it impacts the industry, how the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office operates at the heart of the IP system. And the graduates from IPLI have also joined us as attorneys at Finnegan. It's a program that we sponsor and support. And now over the passage of 10 years, they've got a tremendous cadre of successful, talented Hispanic Latino IP attorneys that are practicing in various areas. We wanted to replicate that model for another woefully underrepresented demographic. Currently, according to the 2022 ABA report, Black attorneys constitute 4.5% of the legal profession. In IP, it's 1.7%. Think about that, 1.7%. So how do we get those numbers up? Well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just find a wheel that we like and we can replicate. So we replicated it and launched it this August 2023. And we accepted applications from diverse candidates from historically underrepresented demographics, and identified 15 top legal talent at various law schools, both incoming 1Ls as well as second years and third years. The program was really instrumental, not because you're coming to DC, you're learning about patent law. It was far beyond that. It was a very intentional program that gave the law students a sense of how we are where we are as individual attorneys that's focused on counseling, that's focused on litigation, with various technical backgrounds, some trademarks, some patent attorneys, and giving them a really open look at what it's like to be a lawyer, and our respective personal journeys of how we ended up where we are. We also wanted to give them a real sense of how does the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office fit into the IP practice? How do judges decide cases? What are they looking for? I wanted them to actually go into courtrooms and experience a courtroom, talk to a real judge, go and see a chamber where judges work, get an internal tour of the courthouse. Our students got a chance to go up to the podium in hearing rooms and actually got to introduce themselves to a sitting judge. I have no doubt that for most students, if not all of them, it was the first time that they've actually been to the chambers of a sitting federal judge. The first time that I walked into a courtroom was as a defendant in a traffic matter, actually representing my father as a law student. That was not a great experience for me. I was so traumatized. I was paralyzed with fear, but the judge was very kind. He knew I was a law student. And after I presented my case and explained the situation, he said, "I hope you're not charging your father for this." And I mean, it just, a passing comment of humanity really meant so much to me as a scared law student going into a courtroom for the first time. And it's that kind of positive experience that I really think goes a long way, exposing the law students who would have never had that opportunity before. At the closing dinner of our first Finnegan IP Summit, we had 15 law students who participated and about 15 volunteer lawyers, the dean of GW, who collaborated with us on the IP Summit. Each of the participants talked about the experience over the last 2 days of the summit. There was not a dry eye in the whole restaurant. We were all in tears. I've never seen my fellow senior partners in tears like that before, in decades of practicing with them. And it was such a special moment because we were all able to be authentic and bring our whole selves in a space where we started out as strangers. And 48 hours later, we became a village. And that's the kind of experience that I think can be transformative and can carry you through some of the additional barriers and hurdles and obstacles that's going to be thrown your way during your long legal career. And so we're really privileged to have had that success this year, and we are looking very much forward to continuing that program in the future.
Thank you so much, Esther. I think before I start crying, we will wrap this interview up. It has been absolutely just a pleasure to speak with you, and I look forward to learning more about you. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. More information about Finnegan's IP University will be in the description. Esther Lim is in Washington, D.C., as am I, and our information will also be in the description. Thank you again, Esther. The Institute thanks you for your time and for your candor, for your advice, and for all that you've done and all that you've done for me. Thank you.
Ariel, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I am so looking forward to witnessing your growth in the legal profession and your contributions and paying it forward. But my remarks would not be complete without thanking the staunch partner with whom I have the privilege of partnering with over the last 2 decades, and that is Professor